Welcome to Monkey Talk, brought to you by
The Bald Monkeys Wrestling Podcast.
And you are shamelessly sideways live on Twitch right now.
Revolutionary moment in world history for my child. So,
Well, that's where we are, everybody.
Here we are.
It's Thursday Night Live. You are here with the Bald Monkeys. It's Monkey Talk time. We got Christopher. He's over there. Possibly, I don't know. I could be pointing the completely wrong way, but I don't give a crap. I'm the captain, Captain Chuckles. And tonight we have a very special guest. As Christopher said earlier today, we've talked to wrestlers. We've talked to CEOs and owners of promotions. One of them also kind of did a little bit of commentary or has gotten into commentary lately. But now we have commentary extraordinaire, as I said in one of my tweets. We have a creative genius who applies his knowledge and his grasp of wrestling to the world of SUP. And if you don't know what SUP is, you're a moron. Southern Underground Pro.
Man,
Go watch it on iwtv live. You can get 5 days. You can use a free trial. Action, that's one of them. I don't know if we have any other ones, but we don't care about that because we have Dylan Hales with us tonight, sir. Thank you for joining us.
that was an intro, man. That was pretty good. You gassed me up pretty good. Gassing me up before the pending burials, no doubt.
I try to get the hype train of the intro to be at least a level 9, maybe 10, and then we can just fall off the cliff from there.
And then then it gets nasty and like personal and hateful as the show goes on. I got you. I feel you.
Exactly.
It's true pro wrestling. You gotta insert some sort of like I don't know, congeniality or kindness at the beginning before you come and club somebody in the back of the head. But I'll take it. Happy to be here with you guys. And before I even get to the point where I field questions, I shouldn't say that I'm notorious for hijacking podcasts, so I feel sorry for both of you. But right out of the gate, two things I want to say. One, I want to thank you guys both for partnering with us and sponsoring us at Southern Underground Pro, but also at Action Wrestling. The Bald Monkeys have been doing a great job. You guys have been doing a great job covering the independent wrestling scene, the Southeastern scene in general, beyond just that, which is obviously where sort of my heart lies. And I really seriously appreciate that you guys do that because it's I mean, we need people that are focused on the scene, that are interested in what we're doing, that are pumping things up, that are gassing our guys up, but are also presenting things in sort of unique ways and just on board and team players to try to develop this even more than it already is. So I really appreciate that. Second thing right out of the gate, I'm just going to say it right here before we start. Couple of tough losses in independent wrestling this week. DK Meadows passed away.
Yes.
Josephus passed away.
Yes.
I didn't know either of them personally. Josephus was friends with a lot of people that I'm friendly with or know as a guy from in Tennessee now. DK Meadows was also friends with some people that I'm friends with. Very different sort of career paths in terms of where they were in their career, but I just want to say peace to them, their families, and their loved ones. You hate to see anybody lose their life so young. In both cases, DK's case very young, but Josephus was also really young too, and both were super talented. And I just I would feel weird if I didn't say anything about that, as it's something that I've been kind of thinking about in the back of my head for the last couple of days.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. And I'll steal something from one of our network friends on Twitch. Push play the DJ and give your loved ones flowers now while they're around. You know,
mhm.
give them those flowers. You know, make people aware of how much they mean to you, and how much those two that you just mentioned mean to wrestling in general. And you know, and hopefully, you know, we don't have any more of those surprises this year. It's already been a few too many in the first couple of months of the year. So.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And again, neither one of them I knew very really at all. I think I've been in the same room as Josephus maybe a couple times, but the you know, I you it's just an awful thing, and my heart goes out
Mhm.
to all of them, and Josephus especially. Just as kind of an aside, being a Tennessee guy, he was part of an era of Tennessee independent wrestling that I think kind of gets understated. There was a big gap in time, similar to sort of Georgia as well, where for a long time Georgia had a lot of really really talented wrestlers, but there really wasn't a huge infrastructure in place for the dissemination of the independent wrestling product to places outside of people that were just going to indie shows in Georgia. Well, something was very similar, that was similar in Tennessee as well. Obviously I kind of have a vested interest here. I do work for IWTV, that is my actual employer, but the reality is one of the reasons I got involved with IWTV is because of years and years of super talented guys, particularly in the southeastern United States, but not just in the southeastern United States, who were just killing it, having these great matches, these great stories, these great feuds on these shows. And they, unless you just happen to stumble upon the right YouTube account, you'd never see it. You'd never know any of it
Mhm.
ever happened. And I wanted to, do what I could to hope, help make sure that that kind of thing doesn't happen anymore, that we can document these great promotions, these great talents, et cetera, et cetera. And Josephus was a super big part of, sort of I guess the early 2000 teens independent wrestling scene in particularly central Tennessee. Big part of the USWO universe, which was, I think, one of the more kind of low key influential independents in the Southeast during that period. It produced a lot of guys who've gone on to do some big things in independent wrestling. The Carnies, John Wayne Murdoch,
Mm.
a bunch of other people. And it would be weird for me also not to mention that. I mean, that maybe that some of that will tie into some of the questions as well. But Josephus does have that sort of in there, and he's kind of in some ways he is one of the guys that helped really build up at the grassroots level that infrastructure through training guys and working on those Middle Tennessee shows right as some of those guys started to develop and get bigger and get out and do more things and get more eyes on their shows. And so there's a linkage there as well that I wanted to acknowledge.
He actually
And
has
it's
a interesting linkage to the Bald Monkeys as well. Chuck, I'll
yeah.
actually let you tell the story.
Well, when we first started out, we had talked to Chris Bay, we had talked to Alan Angels, we had talked to Shaza McKenzie. We were trying to find others to chat with that we thought were interesting. And of course that was at the, I would say, midpoint of when NWA came back with the power stuff. And he was doing he was there as Josephus sometimes, and then he was there as the question mark.
Yeah.
And Chris and I thought it would be the most epic interview if we could interview the question mark. And I messaged him on Twitter, and luckily, as nice as he was, he got back to me, and was full gimmick. He was in the question mark character, and like speaking, broken kind of English because he didn't really speak English. And like we were at the point where we had sent him questions and everything, and he was gonna get it. We weren't gonna do it on camera, but we were gonna do it more like a written interview. And Chris and I were throwing back, how are we gonna do this? Like, what should we do? Like, and unfortunately, like, stuff all the stuff in the world happened, and he had to do some other things. So
Sure.
it was the most epic interview that never happened.
Never happened.
And when I found out last night, I think I was scrolling around Twitter at like one o'clock in the morning, and I happened to see I think Thunder Rosa posted something, and I have my alerts for her because she was on the show, and I was like, oh, I completely shocked, and I just couldn't believe it, and it was it was a sad ending to my night last night, and Dylan, just like you said, I mean, to him and DK, both their families, I mean, you just all the love out there, and you can see the love for both of them on Twitter, on IWTV Live. I think I was watching I don't know if it was Action Clash or Paradigm earlier today, and they had a little intro video with DK up there, and you just you know you just feel bad. It's sad.
Very sad.
Okay, we've done our part. We've taken a moment for everyone. Now we need to get into what we're here for, which is I guess
Cookies?
questions. I guess questions and
Oh.
questions and cookies, right? Like those are the two things we're here for: questions and cookies. And if you've seen our podcast before, you might recognize some of these questions. We try to kind of keep things conversational, but obviously we had to change some things up tonight. So we're going to start out normal, but you're going to see some turns in the road that you've not seen before because Dylan's not a normal guy. I mean, he's just different.
You're not kidding.
And I was just going to say, but he is a normal guy, Christopher. He's just not a wrestler.
No.
I've got my own set of problems, but some pretty severe ones at that. But
we'll get there. So let's just start at the beginning. Let's get to the very beginning where we start all our conversations, and we want to know what a young Dylan was like.
Well, I guess it depends on how young you're going. I mean,
growing up, single digits.
So let's talk context here, okay? So I'm 39 years old, and when I was growing up, I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina. I was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee, but we moved to Charleston when I was like 7 or 8 months old. So I was a baby. That's really where I grew up. And as a kid, as a younger kid, I think I was actually a pretty good kid. I like if you look at like elementary school age, I wasn't in trouble very often. I might like maybe once a year I'd get like a slap on the wrist for something and have BIR for a day. You know what I mean? Like I was not one of these like routinely bad children at a young age. I was a wrestling fan from a very young age. In fact, some of my earliest memories are watching wrestling, being like 4 or 5 years old. Of course, back then, you still had. I'm old enough to remember these TVs where you actually had to turn the knobs, and you had the VHF and the UHF. And back then, in the mid '80s in Charleston, South Carolina, there were still some sort of random shows that you could pick up on the UHF station, wrestling related stuff that you could pick up on UHF station beyond just WWF and at the time what was technically still NWA or Jim Crockett Promotions before WCW bought it in late 1988. So like we had Bill Watts UWF around somewhat. We had a version of Florida TV that you could get sometimes, and so I was super into that. I've always been super into that. I've been a wrestling fan my entire life for as long as I can remember, and that's always been maybe not the primary hobby, but close to it for almost my entire life until now it has become my job. But so that's always been back there. I mean, I played soccer when I was a kid, really all the way through high school. And I was super into music, but that came a little bit later. As an elementary school age kid, though, I was a good kid, man. I stayed out of trouble. Now, once I got into middle school, I became a career criminal, as one does. Middle school age kids. I think even good middle school age kids are still kind of bad. I like when you're like 11, 12, 13 and the hormones first start hitting and you start to get like that taste of real independence. Also, for kids these days, and this is on Twitch, so a lot of people we're talking to that will potentially see this are kids these days. the context is really different. You know, like in that era, not only was there not cell phones, but like there really wasn't anything else when I was real young. So it's like Saturday morning, I'd get up, I'd watch my wrestling, maybe a couple cartoons. I'd get out of the house, I'd get on my bike, I'd ride away, and I'd be gone for maybe 10 hours. You know, like the idea that I'm going to hang out in my house and do anything other than maybe play video games, maybe was like, forget it. That's not going to happen. I'm going to, we're going to go throw the football down at the park, or we're going to go, you know, when I got a little bit older, we're going to go do stuff we shouldn't do, which in my case was like go hang out at the railroad tracks and throw rocks at trains or whatever. But like, this is how it was back then. It's I feel like it's a lot different now. You know, my daughter is 18. She's an adult now, as crazy as that is for me to say. And even in her, you know, life cycle, and she's, like I said, she's an adult now, so she's not like super young anymore. But like how she was raised, like we raised her way different than I, you know, and that's not a knock on my parents. It's just the culture was different. So I say I was a good kid, and I believe that I was, but like I look back, and just because of how weird the culture was then, man, there's stuff I did that I would never, like nowadays I would be horrified if I found out that like an 8-year-old kid was like on top of the elementary school right by his house playing a game that him and his friends had christened suicide soccer, where they took a soccer ball up there and kicked it around and just like prayed somebody didn't fall off the edge, which happened more than once, by the way. Like that like I mean, I would lose my mind if that happened right now. You know what I mean? Like if I found out that like an 8-year-old was doing that.
Yeah. This is the beginning of what I mentioned on Twitter, where there's some similarities between our guest tonight and one of the people on your screen. So we'll get there. I'm sure we'll share stories.
Oh,
You guys,
that whole bike riding thing. I mean, shit. I like if it wasn't the summer. I mean, I would come home from school, do my work, and then I'd be gone. I would either be playing hockey or I'd be riding my bike somewhere. And like now, like my wife and my kids see, like I'd be like, oh yeah, I used to ride my bike over here, and they're like, this is a highway. Why are you riding your bike on a highway?
Yeah.
I was like, it's just called blah 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 highway. I don't really deem it a highway. I was fine, and then as I'm driving, I'm like, shit, it really is kind of close.
Yeah. There's so many examples of stuff like that. I mean, some stuff I won't even mention because I'm not sure the federal statute of limitations has expired. But they're like,
close.
you know, there were instances of road construction for what are now major thoroughfares, where like me and my friends would go and like, you know, play around on bulldozers that had keys left in them.
I mean, no.
This is really not wise stuff to be doing. And again, I felt like I was a good kid for a lot of that period. Now, again, by middle school, forget it. And like, you know, high school, I was doing my own stuff. Like by the time I was in middle school, I was super into music and like going to punk rock shows and stuff all the time. And it's even more so in high school. That was like everything in high school. And it just, so the different dynamics were at play there. But yeah, as a young kid, I think my parents would back me on this. I think mom and dad would back me on this. I wasn't that bad in elementary school. I was a pretty easy kid by the standards of a lot of kids.
Now you mentioned that you've always been a wrestling fan, but
yeah,
everybody kind of remembers like the beginning of when they became a wrestling fan, or some, let's just call it early years of being a wrestling fan. How did that happen? What stood out to you?
So when I was real little, what I would do is, and when I mean real little, so I lived in basically two houses growing up. And the first house I lived in until a couple months into my first grade year. So I don't have a ton of memories there, but like that's where I learned how to ride my bike. You know, so I have some memories in that house. And then the second house we moved into when I was in first grade, and we were there until actually shortly after I graduated from high school. So basically almost all of my schooling was in that house. And but I distinctly remember that first house, you know, watching wrestling there. And what I would do then is, at the time, I mean, you're talking like kindergarten age me. So we're talking like, say, 86-ish. I would watch wrestling shows on TV. Um, Usually, 6:05 on Saturdays was like the time period that you know, 'cause TBS was one of the few cable stations back then too. We only had in Charleston at the time, I think there was 26 channels on TV until I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, and TBS was channel 12. I'll never forget it because that's where wrestling. That's where you know you'd have your wrestling on Saturday. Not that you also had syndicated shows by then, but that was like the main go-to. And I would sit and I would count. This is like in some ways this is one of my earliest wrestling memories, even though it's not a particular moment. But I think it shows sort of it, it's not surprising I got into commentary when you hear how nerdy this is. I would sit and I would take a little sheet, a little piece of paper, and I would tally the offensive moves of each wrestler in a match. And back then, most of the matches were squash matches, right? And so like I would just like there would be like a debate. Like at the time, I didn't know it was called, or the parlance for it was schoolboy, but I would be like, is that really an offensive move? I mean, you can win with it, but it doesn't really hurt your opponent. So like my little like 5 or 6 year old brain is like trying to analyze what qualifies as an offensive move in the context of a wrestling match. Does an Irish whip count? Well, an Irish whip to the turnbuckle, even then, again, not knowing what the word sell meant, but I could see that guys would sell it like it hurt. Whereas an Irish whip to the ropes, they whip right back off. Well, okay, so if it's in the ropes, it doesn't count. But if it's in the turnbuckle, it does. This is the kind of like super nerd behavior I was exhibiting as a kindergartner, where I didn't even like. So, and literally, I was doing it tally style because I don't even know. I mean, I could probably count to like 20 or something, but like, there's no way. Like, I was so young, I really couldn't even count like in a meaningful sense, probably, right? So you know, I remember doing that when I was real little. And I remember, the first wrestling show I ever went to was at the St. Andrews High School gym, which is the high school my father later worked at. And the main event was the Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight Express. They went to a 60-minute draw, and actually Jim Cornette actually talks about this in the Midnight Express scrapbook. On that show, I guess technically it wasn't a draw. They were supposed to go to a 60-minute draw, but they had a guest timekeeper. The guest timekeeper was a local from the high school who I believe was the high school janitor that was still there when my dad would later teach at that school years later. Guy everybody called Shorty. And he was convinced that the Rock and Roll Express were going to win if they had more time. So he refused to ring the bell at 60 minutes. And they basically had to do a schmoz finish because of it. They had a rogue timekeeper. That was the first wrestling show I ever went to.
It's amazing.
But, so those are just like a couple of my early memories. I mean, like I remember seeing footage of the Kerry Von Erich world title victory over Ric Flair from Texas Stadium. But that could have been something I saw on like a world-class syndicated program maybe a year later than when it actually happened, because I believe that switch happened in '84, and I don't really have any memories from anything that young. My brainwaves start kind of. I have some loose wrestling sort of stuff from '85 that kind of sticks with me from some that just bits and pieces here and there. '86 is where it really takes off, and I start to have more vivid memories of wrestling stuff. And I would say from '87 on, I have a pretty obsessive memory about it. The big turning point year for me, of course, was '89, because my dad's been a lifelong Terry Funk fan. That's when Terry Funk came into WCW / the NWA. Mm-hmm. It's a year that is widely regarded as one of the best pro wrestling years ever for a wrestling company in the United States. And by that time, here's the big hook. My best friend's father growing up worked security. He was not a direct. It wasn't like he was working for Doug Dillinger. You know what I mean? Like he wasn't a WCW security guy, but he worked security for multiple venues in South Carolina, and did at least once in Savannah. Maybe, I think actually more than once in Savannah. And so I would get to go to basically all WCW events from the time they started running the McAllister Fieldhouse, and I'd have to look back at when that was, probably '88, may have been earlier. But from the time they started running the McAllister Fieldhouse, which is on the Citadel campus in Charleston, and at the time they were running very often there. I went to every WCW event that ran there and was there way early. In fact, technically, the first ring I ever helped set up was a WCW ring. Uh, like, I mean, barely. I'm like helping stretch a canvas or something, but like as a child. Um, but so that and that went on until they moved to the North Charleston Coliseum when that opened in '94. So for probably a 6-year period, I went to every show there early, as well as the spot shows that they would do, which they were still doing at that time, even in places like Sumter, South Carolina. But also, we'd still we go to Columbia, we go to Savannah sometimes, Florence every now and again. So I went to tons of shows in that period from, say, the time I was maybe 7-ish to the 13. In that stretch, I went to probably over 100 WCW shows in the state of South Carolina and Georgia. Yeah, or close to it, near dozens for sure.
Just there with your notepad tallying offensive moves at all these shows.
Yeah. So that you know what, that actually tapered off a little bit by the time I got to be maybe 8. All joking aside, that's frighteningly accurate. Like the because by that point, so my first, again, I'm dating myself here, but years ago there was actually 2 newspapers in South Carolina, in Charleston. There now it's the Post and Courier, but it used to be the News and Courier in the morning and the Evening Post at night. Well, my father and my uncle had routes on both. And during the summer months, I would do. At the time, my dad was paying his way through grad school on his way to become a teacher, which he'd go on to do, and now he's like an infamous wrestling Twitter personality, Papa Hales. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But we that was sort of the trajectory for him, and that's why he was doing newspaper routes and things like that. And in the afternoons, I would do. In the mornings, I would do them with him during the summer months, but in the afternoons, I would go and roll newspapers. And these guys, not my dad or my uncle, but many of the other people were like college students who didn't care or hungover, and they wanted to do as little work as possible. So they'd throw me like $3 or $4, to roll like 200 newspapers worth of stuff. And I'd sit there. That was like my first job, was rolling newspapers at like 7 or 8 years old. And the drop site was in Eckerd, which no longer there. It's right, if anybody ever goes to Charleston, South Carolina, it's right there at the foot of West Ashley, right before you go into downtown, right before you cross the bridges, right before that big Holiday Inn there. That's where the old drop site was. Very centrally located place. It used to be an Eckerd drugstore, old school drugstore with the fountains and the candy and all that stuff, and also every wrestling magazine known to man. And I would roll newspapers, then get off my little ass, walk inside, get some candy, maybe some baseball cards if I was feeling it, and any new wrestling magazine. And during that era, not only did you have the after mags, which cycled like quarterly at Inside Wrestling, The Wrestler, then they had their, I can't remember what obviously PWI is the most famous one, but there was a few others, the Weston mags really. And then you also had the George Napolitano magazines, who's like the other big photographer other than Bill Apter that a lot of people may remember from that period, which was like a totally separate set of magazines. I think New Wave Wrestling was one of them. And there literally, there were 12 or 15 different wrestling magazines you could buy there. And the way they staggered them is because some would come out quarterly and some would come out, you know what I'm saying? Like almost every week there was a new one. So like it wasn't like it'd be like, oh man, I gotta wait for next month to get them. No. Basically every week, sometimes twice a week, you might be able to find a new one in there. So I was stocking up then, and that was like the tool for analysis. And when I talk commentary now, one of the things I tell guys, like when people ask for feedback, when I'm talking to other people pretending like I know what I'm doing, is I say you gotta you got to think with your, there's 2 ways to call them. There's 2 ways to think about a wrestling match. One of them is, particularly if you're not a wrestler, but I think even as a wrestler, this applies in many cases. One of them is the sort of the Dave Meltzer, the Wrestling Observer brain, right? Where you think you know everything, or you think you know everything, and you're plugged in and you know what's going on backstage and blah 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 blah. But when you're calling a wrestling match, you have to think with your PWI brain. You have you don't necessarily have to think like you're 7 years old, but you have to think with your PWI brain. You have to think of it through the framework. And I always feel like I have a huge advantage relative to some people with commentary because of the number of wrestling magazines I read as a child. Because that really that whole framework for viewing wrestling never really felt alien to me. You know, I think some people, when they get quote smartened up, I hate that phrase, but like I think some people, when they hit that point, it's like they feel like they discovered the Rosetta Stone and now everything like and that's really not necessary. You know, I think you can do both. You know, and like you can it's but yeah, this is a typical Dylan Hales podcast rant you guys are being subjected to. So
Yeah, I warned the chat that
We're
we are
okay.
actually on question 1 still.
Well, two.
But you kind
Two.
of answered question 2, so it works out. So because
Yeah.
I'm done, and you guys could become best friends because I'm just tired of hearing the same life that you guys basically had. So
What? I delivered papers too. That was my first job. I had my paper route and, rolling up papers, trying to be as far away from the stoop as possible, but just landing it at that perfect spot, right, right underneath the door, You get that perfect. Anyway,
this is the
I know. Yes,
the podcast now. This is it.
It's true. It is. That's okay, Christopher. You're along for the ride, bro.
I'm just here.
Do an hour on bagging techniques if you like for when it rains.
This is God. This is out the window. It's God.
The format's done.
We're out of here. Well, okay, so all similarities aside, so we heard yeah, now you can't even read your shit, man. Come on. So we heard there's an analytical background. There's a looking at a wrestling match as a fan, but on a deeper level. So how did you actually get into commentary? Like what brought you to that front of the wrestling industry?
So that's a great question. So I've been a super fan and obviously for a long time, and I started tape trading, which I didn't even mention this. I started tape trading when I was like 10 years old, in part because there were ads in those magazines and other places, and you could, what I mean? So I got plugged into that network very, very early. My dad was a high school yearbook teacher for a while, which meant I got AOL discs out the ass very early on, which meant, and even before that, I had some internet access. So I was like plugged into that universe relatively early by the standards of a lot of people. And, I started to get some friends that were sort of like in and around the periphery of the wrestling business, when I was still a teenager. And I briefly considered doing stuff in wrestling, but at that time I was so big into music. Like I was in bands that were like recording and like, not anybody huge, but like that was my life. That was as much my life as wrestling was in a lot of ways, even though they were kind of dual obsessions. So the idea of doing anything, I briefly, I don't even like to talk about it because it implies that there's more meaning to it than there actually was. I briefly trained to be a referee, which basically meant somebody that was barely trained themselves bumped me a few times, and like I was like, no, screw this. And I was like 17 or 18 when that happened, and then I had a child very young, and I was my ex-wife and I were taking care of a kid, and I was working. I worked at a bunch of different jobs. Worked at Barnes and Noble for over a decade, and was just sort of having in that world. I split up with my ex-wife, and I was obviously super big into wrestling this entire time. Big into tape trading, big into the whole message board geek scene, of which I still, come out of, and a lot of wrestlers come out of that too, by the way. Don't let them fool you. Whole lot of them do. But I was super into that universe. Like some, and that was like the entire time. And then when I split with my ex, which this isn't a romance podcast or a breakup podcast, but
Could be.
it's amicable now. No bad feelings long term at all. But when that happened, I ended up in a position, and some things were and like I was getting more and more into wrestling, and some things started to slowly sort of fall in my lap. I got hooked up with the Scenic City Invitational, and it was sort of a weird situation where I was being asked by everybody who was involved with SCI for my opinions on stuff, but I wasn't actually like making decisions. But it was very strange because they were all like quietly behind each other's backs, being like, "Hey man, what do you think about this?" You know, and I'd be like, I think it's a good idea, this, that, and the other thing, and eventually I got brought onto the SCI team officially. I kind of unofficially was in 2016. I may as well have been, but by the end of 2016, I was like a full blown helping creatively with that and doing some other stuff. And then when SUP was about to start in early 2017, we were told, I believe I was on a car ride with Righteous Jesse, and I don't even remember who else, because there was 2 different car rides. But I believe Jesse was for sure in one of them. And we were talking about like who's good, because he was going to ring announce, as he does there. He's tremendous at it. Nobody like him in that building in Basement East. And we were debating like what's going to well, we'll need somebody for commentary. And like I had, for going back several years at that point, I had a handful of people in and around wrestling be like, "You should try it. I think you'd be okay at it." Because I've done tons of podcasts going back years. Like my first wrestling podcast were like when podcasts were just starting, and I was like, it's a totally different thing. It's not the same deal, because it isn't. It's a totally different skill set. And but you talk, you like the sound of your own voice, as evidenced by right now. And I said, no, it's not. It's what anyway. So we circle back, and we're sitting in the car, and I'm like, well, I guess I could try it. We'll see how it goes, And I kind of started gassing myself up. I think I'll be all right. I think I'll do this. So first SUP show comes, and this show is kind of lost to time. There's a version of it. The everything was DIY. It's the only show that was produced entirely in house, I believe. Actually, there might have been one other, but so you can find the edit online. It's not the best. That's not a knock on the person who put it together. He did a great job. It's just none of us knew what we were doing. And I don't even know if any or much of the commentary tracks hold up, but I felt pretty good about it. It was one of these things where once I did it, I felt like, okay, I'm just going to keep doing it. And this sort of fits with the focus of what I want to do, which is like help build up the infrastructure of independent wrestling in the Southeast. So now I can do that by also lending my thoughts and my voice here. Also on that first SUP show, I kind of accidentally helped agent some matches, which was not necessarily an intention ahead of time. And by that point, I was already helping creatively with SCI, so I guess that wasn't that weird. But so very, very quickly, it became like, okay, well, now you're helping promote a show, you're helping promote and book this other show. Now you're doing commentary, and then it sort of was like a steady progression from there to now. It's like I work for iwtv. That's my full-time job. It's a great job. I love it. I do commentary for Action, help Matt with some booking stuff there as well. Help creatively at SUP, do commentary there. Been able to do commentary several other shows as well. So it's kind of I don't have. There's not a. I think with a lot of people, there's like more of a eureka moment with a lot of things in life. I really didn't have that, because part of it too is that I started so late. I didn't start doing any of this stuff until I was well into my 30s. So it wasn't like it was this thing where I'm going to start. I mean, I would have been terrible if I was doing this when I was like 20. I mean, I would have been absolutely awful. Everything I complain about, that commentary that I don't like about contemporary commentary, I would have been 100% guilty of if I was doing it in my 20s. So there's a level of perspective, I think, that comes with just being an old fart doing it too. But there really wasn't a eureka moment. It was a sort of a gradual progression of things, and then just once I did it, I was like, okay, I can do this. And to be honest with you, even though I've done commentary for other places that I don't have creative involvement with, I've done an NGW show or two, done a little bit at New South, did part of a show at St. Louis Anarchy, some other places as well. But when you're involved in the creative process, boy, in some ways it does give you a huge advantage when you're on commentary. And also, I really like it because it helps guide the narratives that we want guided. And no matter how good or how much you trust another person, if you outsource that job, no matter how good they are, you can't be 100% sure that they're going to hit the notes you want, because even if you tell them, you might forget something until day of show, and then you're sitting there and going, oh crap, I wanted them to emphasize this. It's too late. You can't walk up to them and be like, hey, like the show's going on. Like, so that's not an option. So that's another sort of facet in my case where it's nice to be able to do that. Again, I have called shows where I don't have that, and that's fun too, because you just sort of can distance yourself from it. And, but man, it is very beneficial to be able to call a show that you have some creative involvement in.
Well, it's kind of like what we talk about with some of the wrestlers, of just being in the right place at the right time, and you found yourself in the right place at the right time to lend, your talents to, Scenic City, and then to SUP, and then progressively on from there. So, I mean, Christopher, you said it's not like our other ones. I mean, it is. He was there.
What do I know?
Ready.
What do I know? This is just another interview. I don't know. What do I know?
Come on.
Hey, shout out. Thanks, Charlie Butters, for following. Thank you, Will, for the subscription. Go follow Will, W34PONX. He's awesome. He just had Jonesy on earlier. And let's see. And Joseph Blair, Wrestle Idiot, thanks for the follow. There we go.
Ooh, there we go.
And there's some other idiots talking in the chat too, and they're just giving you all sorts of heck, Dylan. I'm just telling you.
Oh, I'm sure, but listen, I'm a drawing heel.
Look at this. It's great.
You go.
Apparently, your favorite wrestler is what's this guy's name?
Oh, come on! Don't disrespect him.
Oh, number one.
Number one.
He says
number one.
He says, yes. Dayton Newman says he's number one.
Oof.
Exactly.
He's all right. He's all right. Actually, all joking aside, that to break the fourth wall here and obliterate kayfabe and talk with my Wrestling Observer brain and not my PWI brain, the Jaden is one of the wrestlers I'm most proud of. There's a lot of them who I'm very proud of, like the hard work they've put in over the years. But he went from being a guy who was almost uniformly derided and hated in this area among old veterans and stuff for things that frankly weren't even his fault. He was just a teenage kid whose, granddad wanted to help him get into wrestling, and the assumption was that things were handed to him because of that. I actually think that's completely false. In fact, I think if anything, the exact opposite is true. He was held to a much higher standard than other people because of that assumption. And he had to constantly prove himself. And I put him, over the years, we've put him in situations where, it was sink or swim. It was sink or swim. He was either going to have a good match or he was screwed. He was either going to step up and earn more, or he was going to be sorry, maybe in a year, and listen, there's nobody who I rip as much as him, even privately. He would say so himself, because whenever he does it, but it's because I think he has so much potential, and I think it's remarkable how much he's improved. To me, he's one of the most improved wrestlers on the planet, regardless of, and I watch everything. It's my job to watch everything, and I think he's one of the most improved wrestlers on the planet over the last 3 years. He still does stuff that drives me crazy in every match, and he has to hear about it. But man, compared to where he was and he is, and he's a baby, you know,
Still
he's
real
so
young.
young.
Yeah.
Like another couple years, there are not going to be too many people better than him. I really think that. And if you had told me I was going to be saying that 5 years ago, I would have laughed in your face. I would have laughed in your face. I would have said you're insane. But give him another couple years. There are not going to be a lot of people in wrestling better than him, and on any level. I really think that.
My question is he going to bring back the fuzzy boots? I mean, that's what I want to know. After that coming out in the Val Pancakes interview that she did with him, and then going on YouTube myself and finding numerous. And when I say numerous, there are numerous, and it was fantastic, fantastic. Jaden, we love you.
I'm gonna say something potentially problematic here. Okay. But oh well. Yeah, it's late. I'm gonna work blue. The first time I saw Jaden, he was a teenager. It was at the TWE building. I went to a show because Steve Corino was on it. Steve Corino wrestled Ray Fury in the main event, and Jaden wrestled Colby Corino on that show, as I recall. And at the time, I didn't even really know that it was Jaden's show because I was visiting Chattanooga. I hadn't moved back yet. I was still living in Charleston. And the party monster or party animal or party starter or whatever the hell that gimmick was.
Party starter.
Jaden Newman, at the age of probably 16 or 17 years old, hopped up on me and was thrusting in my face in a way that would have made Jeffrey Epstein blush. It was extremely uncomfortable.
Oh, man.
I do not know if footage of this existed, but after the show was over, I was like, I turned to my dad. I said, I have no clue how old that kid is, but that was really weird. That was what just happened. That would have been weird if he was like 25 or 35, but I don't think he's of age, and what just happened made me very uncomfortable. So yeah, I got to witness that gimmick in person, and man,
all right, so it
was something.
The challenge to the chat. I expect to see that image on social media later tonight. So
yes,
chat, do your work.
Do your thing. Okay, so we gotta talk. As much as we would love to talk about Jaden for the rest of what we got going on here and fuzzy boots and all that kind of stuff, we got there's a couple of shows coming up. We have one in which we hope we might have an announcement that supposedly you might have, and that's for the March 14th show, Southern Underground Pro. It is entitled Are These Our Lives? And then later that week, we go to Action on the 19th, and we have the You Can't Do That in a Wrestling Ring. I don't know if that's the first half or the second half of the doubleheader, but we have that one. And then we have
first half.
Okay, so that's the first half. And then we have what is the epic second half. That is Cells Royal
versus Cells 2.
Royal Cells 2. However Matt
Royal Cells
is calling it. So I guess first, let's talk the sub show. That's going to happen first in the week. So do we know anything about it yet? I feel like sub keeps going, we're going to announce something, and then nothing gets announced.
So here's what we know. Okay, we know that on March 14th, Southern Underground Pro is returning to the Basement East for a closed set taping.
Yes.
Now, how exactly this content is going to be made available, and for that matter, how much content is not yet public. Okay, but if you notice, we have deliberately said show (S) in parentheses multiple times on social media. So there may or may not be multiple pieces of content that come out from the March 14th events. Now, we do have so far, we do have one match announced. Last night, late in the day, we announced a match, which is Violence is Forever defending the sub tag team championships against the Bitcoin
The
Boys.
Bitcoin Boys,
There's
yes.
an interesting dynamic there. First of all, I want to know if the Bitcoin Boys are Bitcoin Cash. That's separate. We can talk about that at a later date. But interesting dynamic there, of course, is that Dominic Guarini is one of the training folk, the mentors, if you will, at the AIW Training Academy, which is where the Bitcoin Boys are out of. So this has a teacher-student dynamic that I don't think should be slept on at all. Those matches, historically, in my experience, particularly on the independents, those matches almost always exceed expectations, almost without fail. In fact, it's pretty much a certainty that they will, and so that's an interesting one. That was announced yesterday. Of course, Violence is Forever, 2-time now IWTV Independent Wrestling Tag Team of the Year. By the way, if anybody's wondering, those awards are a shoot. Unlike the PWI awards, which I think are actually now a shoot, but they weren't when I was a kid. We actually, like, the votes come in and we just count them as they come in. So that 2 straight years, Violence is Forever has been the Tag Team of the Year according to a very large number of voters for the IWTV awards. I mean, those awards do very, very big numbers. It's a kind of a task to count them, even with algorithms and stuff, because people put names in differently and especially when you get to match of the year. But whatever, I'm not going to complain. So that's a big one. But I'm going to drop another one on you. Also want to thank Kevin Marshall for sponsoring that, by the way. But I want to drop another one on you. So this one has never been announced anywhere else up to this point. Although I do have a tweet set in drafts that I'll press as soon as I get off with you guys, which is on March the 14th. So I was thinking, I was like, what can I give the Bald Monkeys? What can we do for these guys? They're such good supporters of what we do in the South. Let's see. We got this match we could give them. We got that match. What if my feed went out right now? No, but I decided that this was I thought a perfect fit. So this match is sponsored by the guys at IWTV Guide. I want to give them a shout out. They do excellent work.
Shout out, yeah.
They do.
Covering the IWTV universe as you guys do. So shout out to them. Big, huge help. We could not do this without sponsors, especially for a closed set taping. Believe me, without sponsors, we would not be able to do this show. Our shows. But to my knowledge, this is the first time ever matchup. And this term gets overused. The term rising star in independent wrestling especially is a cliche and a catch-all. And it's often accurate, but I think it's also oftentimes what people put when they don't know what to put. But in this case, I think both these guys are actually rising stars. So making his Southern Underground Pro debut, Alex Kane, the Suplex Assassin, heading into the Basement East to take on Cole Radrick, the returning Cole Radrick.
Oh, yes.
Oh, my God.
That's huge.
That one will take place March 14th at These Are Lives, which, of course, will be available on IWTV.
Damn.
And again, sponsors IWTV Guide. Thank you very much for that, for helping make that possible.
Where's my counter?
This is I know. I mean, Cole can take a lot of damage.
Damn.
So, like, there might be like 100 suplexes because Cole can take a lot.
Love it.
And I think, to me, I'm happy with every single match we have lined up. This one to me is kind of a special one in a way because Alex Kane is somebody that I think we are seeing something special and maybe don't even realize it yet. And he improves every time out. He has a presence to him that I think a lot of guys who are really good don't ever really find, and he's someone who, again, this time next year, man, I mean, the sky's the limit. And on the flip side of that, Cole Radrick is a dude who, another one kind of like a Jake Newman. Cole was a guy who worked hard and he traveled and did that from this, that, and the other thing. But a lot of it wasn't fully clicking, and I think he'd say so himself. But he just kept at it. And another one of these guys that over the course of the last couple of years, and I've said this on commentary before at Action, in fact, if you go back and check out his match with Brett Eisen from a recent Action show, he's another one, man. There's not a whole lot of guys that have improved as much as he has in the last couple of years. I mean, he has gotten pretty darn good pretty quick. And I think that this one, I mean, even taking off my shameless promoter hat, putting it on the side here, I do think that this is like has show stealing potential. I truly do. Yeah, I'm very excited for it. Very, very excited for it. So that's your Bald Monkeys podcast exclusive here.
Scoop.
Blew my mind. I love it.
On
Twitch. I love the match.
2 Bald Monkeys podcast alumni as well, going head to head. So
one and a half.
Hey, he was spoken to. Cole was spoken to.
That's true. That's true.
Okay, so I'm gonna put you guys in the hot seat. I'm doing that thing where I hijack podcast.
Geez.
I'm gonna put you in the hot seat. Who's winning? Who's your? Or I won't even say who's winning. I'll ask you who the favorite is. I think that's a more fair question. Who's the favorite? If you're an odds maker, who's the favorite in a Cole Radrick, Alex Kane match at Southern Underground Pro on March 14th?
For the favorite, I would say you got to give it to Cole, because I feel Alex he's the newcomer. He's the new guy on the block in a lot of places. He's the up and comer. I think he's the underdog. In my opinion,
I could see that logic. I can see that. Christopher, what do you got?
See, but I'm thinking Alex Kane just came off a big win against Chase Holiday at the Action Show. He's had a couple of other matches that have just shown up on iwtv that you should check out, that he's suplexing guys left and right.
4-0 in Paradigm.
Kane is on a streak right now. So if anything, I actually think Alex Kane's probably the favorite right now, because he's hot right now and he's on a streak. And Cole's he's been beaten up a little bit his last few matches. He's been beaten down, and obviously Alex is the bigger guy, and I think Alex is trying to hit those 10 suplexes. He's a little bit upset that he hasn't hit 10 in the last few matches. So I'd be afraid.
Going for the double digits. By the way, what you guys just did, that is commentary seminar from Dylan Hales right there. Because I'm serious. If anybody's watching this and you want to get into wrestling commentary, that's the sort of question that you need to be thinking about before a match is who's the favorite? How do I frame who the favorite is? Who has the advantage? How do they have the advantage? What are the advantages? Like, this is exactly the kind of stuff that I love to hear when you're talking about a pro wrestling match. That's how you do it. That's how you do it right there. So, and both those arguments are credible too. That's the thing about it. You like, if you're looking at it with that PWI hat on, if you got that brain coming into it, there is a credible argument that Cole's more experienced. He's more seasoned in SUP. That's going to give him an advantage. And there's also a credible argument that Alex Kane, he's just kind of in beast mode lately. You know, like, and so I think either or is an acceptable answer. Like, to me, like, if I'm sitting in the booth, I probably say exactly what you two guys just said. Like, it is. And I guess I will be sitting in the booth on March 14th. So yeah. I'll just crib this. You guys
there you go. Just clip it. Yeah, just do
anything. I'm just gonna lay out for that match and just let you guys talk.
I mean, now my money, and this is no shot against Cole. I love his work in the ring, but my money is on my man Alex Kane. I mean, I got a passport to Suplex Island. I mean, it's been stamped numerous times. I love going to that place. It's so much fun. And
is it the South Pacific?
I can't tell you. If you don't know where it is, I can't tell you. You got to talk to Alex about that.
Fair enough.
I mean, and the man has a killer entrance song. I mean, come on.
The entrance song's
come on.
Great.
I love it. I love
great.
it.
Pretty good.
Well, I mean, that's two awesome matches to start off with, and I mean, I can't
check
wait.
out the sub Twitter at subgraps on Twitter at SUP_graps, because I think we will probably announce at least one more tomorrow. We may realistically we might announce as many as 3 over the weekend. That's not out of the question. It's not out of the question that we'll do a Friday, Saturday, Sunday type deal. We haven't discussed it yet, but we've kind of got the graphics in place, which is one of the things we were waiting on, among some other things. Of course, also the other reality is, in this day and age with COVID and everything else going on, you want to make sure that things are solid before you announce matches, because knock on wood, anything can happen anyway. But that's part of the reason why we've kind of kept things a little bit back, is that you just want to make sure as best you can.
Yeah.
And not, you try not to overpromise. But if there's one thing I can say about Sub, it's that I think atmospherically in the Basement East, even with no fans in the building, I think that's one of the best independent professional wrestling venues in the world. And I am very, very confident with the lineups that we have assembled, and with the talent that we have coming in, that what we produce is going to be really good. I have very, very strong hopes for it. Knowing how excited a lot of these guys are to get back in the Basement East in particular, and how much that building has meant to so many people. I'm worried about the show, as you always are about any show, because there's so many things that you've got to do, but I'm not worried about the quality at all. I have zero, like that. I don't know if I've ever worried less about the quality of content than with with what we're doing with Sub. I just feel like everybody is going to be so excited to be back in Nashville, back in the Basement East, in that sort of family environment there, that it's going to be wild. It's going to be wild. It's going to be a wild scene. If you're new to Sub, you've never checked it out, go over to iwtv, check out Southern Underground Pro. Again, I'm biased, man. Obviously, I help promote, book, do commentary there. Yeah, it's fine, whatever. I will put what we do next to any independent going today in terms of just the overall atmosphere and vibe. And we've had tons of good matches. We've had everything from the craziest brawls you've ever seen, Violence is Forever versus Marco Stunt and Cabana Man Dan, which on paper you might think that's a brawl. Go watch that match. Go watch that match, okay? That is one of the most insane matches that has taken place on the Indies in the last 5 years. I had multiple people that go to deathmatch shows regularly come up to me after that match was over in the building and say, "Man, that was uncomfortable. That was like a level of violence that was like disturbing." And we've had everything from stuff like that to Daniel Makabe come in there and tear it up with Kevin Koo on the mat, to the great series with Kurt Stallion and AJ Gray. Like we've just had so much good stuff there over the years. Obviously Brett Eisen, who in many ways is the person that I think is most synonymous with Sub. And if you're an action person and you're an action person, which I'm sure is the case with a lot of Bald Monkeys viewers and listeners, there's a lot of overlap, but it's a different vibe. It's a lot of overlap, but a different vibe, including for a long time, the promotions had the same champion, AC Mack, for a long time held the title both places. So there's a lot to like at SUP, and I'm really, really excited for March 14th. I think it's going to be crazy, and I'm also excited for March 19th too. It's great. Like, I'm very fortunate because those two shows, they represent sort of different parts of my wrestling brain and what I contribute, but they're not so different that I can't be the same person. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like I have, like, they're Action is more, it's a family friendly show. Sup is more of a adult. I hate that term for that, but like,
Yeah.
it's more in that vein. But action, it I get to do both of these things that I like, and it's really cool. Like, so, and there's a lot of things that work well both places. There's some things that don't work well both places. Some things we do at Action we cannot do at Sup, and vice versa. That's absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that I have a place where we can kind of do both, and I get to be involved somewhat creatively and do commentary and work with people I really like, it's really cool. It's really cool, and I love it. And yeah, I think March 19th is going to be a big deal, and then of course down in Tampa is going to be a big deal too. That's going to be that's the joint the joint show. Have fun, be sad. So that's going to be a wild scene as well. I've got I don't have an announcement there because Matt would kill me, but I have
Matt?
Inside knowledge.
I am privy to.
I think I saw him in the chat. Matt?
Who's in there?
That I'm privy to some stuff that may or may not be happening then, and that's going to be a wild atmosphere.
So basically, what you're saying is for anybody who's watching, make sure you follow Action, make sure you follow Sup, so you can get and turn your notifications on, so that you know exactly when these matches are getting told to everybody. And two of the guys that you mentioned before, Kevin Koo and Cabana Man Dan, just had a really, really good match the other day. So if you got IWTV, go find it.
Yeah, check it out. Action Clash. Shout out to New South too. They're doing great things.
I think it was the first match of the night. So if you didn't want to watch the rest of it, you can watch the first one and.
You should watch the rest of it because Jordan Oliver.
You should. Oh yes. Yes.
And that
was the main event that night.
Yeah, New South. Those great. They're doing great stuff too. Alabama wrestling for a long time in the indie scene, rightly or wrongly. This is not like, it's weird. There was a period where Alabama wrestling was like, oh, there's some really good guys. Like this was like years and years and years ago. And Cabana Man Dan was actually one of those guys. Christian Haim was another one, and there were some others in that group as well. And then there was like a long period where like Alabama wrestling was considered a joke by a lot of people. This is not me editorializing. I'm reporting what the general sentiment was. That's just a fact. Anybody who says otherwise is lying. I'm sorry. Whether that's fair or not, we can debate. But that was the sentiment for a long, long time. And over the course of the last, I guess, nearing 6 years now, for New South, they've worked very, very hard to change the reputation of Alabama wrestling, to cultivate a fan base there, and to do some sort of unique things in the Alabama wrestling space where they train people, but they also have their veterans, and then they also bring in guys. So you kind of get a little piece of each thing, right? Mm-hmm. And there's some guys that have really come along there that I've started doing stuff other places. And look, to me, it's all credit to the talent. Like I try never to be one of these promoters or guys involved in creative who's like, I helped make this guy. That's a bad look, man. These guys are the guys taking bumps, dude. Like get off your own soapbox. It's cool if you can give opportunities to guys that go out and kill it and they make you look smart. Be happy that they make you look smart. Don't tell everybody how smart you are. But one thing I will say for New South is, I'll say this on their behalf. Even though I would not do this if I was in their shoes, but I'll say this on their behalf. Guys like Adam Priest and Kevin Ryan, for example, these guys really have been given some great opportunities there, and it has really been very helpful for them, both in their development and getting more eyes on them to get more opportunities other places. And having more places like that in the Southeast, whether it be Sup, whether it be New South, whether it be Action, Scenic City when it's running, all of which have completely different vibes, by the way, all of them. Mm-hmm. That is so huge, because for a long time, I'm not going to sit here and say there was none. I mean, you go back far enough, Wildside was huge. PWX has done a lot of great stuff in North Carolina. It's not like there's been none. That would be an understatement. But relative to the amount of talent in the region, it's been pretty rough at times. And I'm quite happy that the worst of that is behind us. That is very, very nice, because years and years of guys, the guy I always point to is Sean Tempers, who I just feel like was super talented. You could also take a guy like Mr. Teen Excitement, Drew Haskins, who was another Middle Tennessee guy that came out of the same era as Josephus. These guys were so good, man. And I mean, really, really good. And they did some cool stuff here and there. I mean, Sean Timbers was an NWA North American champion at a time when that really meant a pretty good deal. And and Drew Haskins did some cool stuff and had some some spots here and there. But man, if the infrastructure had been around just a few years earlier, those guys might be making a living in pro wrestling right now.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And like, I'm very, very happy that infrastructure and the sort of realities on the ground have slowly started to shift for more and more guys all over the country, but especially here in the Southeast.
It's, I mean, Chris and I have mentioned it before. I mean, coming from two guys that were primarily looking at the larger companies.
We were not indie guys. We were not indie guys, period. I'll say that right now.
Yeah. Having our eyes opened up to, I mean, there's so much good independent wrestling out there that like it blows my mind every day. Like when I see somebody that we've talked to is like, now they're over here, they're over there. And then I start looking at like that card and I'm like, New Texas has a great show coming up this Saturday.
Yep, Astro World.
We're sponsoring Calvin Tankman in his match. That card, Chris is like, what? I don't even know.
Chuck just did it. I was like, okay, cool.
It's Calvin Tankman versus Mysterious Q, right? Isn't that for the title?
Yes.
Oh, that'll be
for the title.
Match. Mysterious Q is really, really good. Tankman's great. I mean, that's a hell of a match. That's another promotion.
That whole card. That whole card is just stacked.
It's stacked. And it's another promotion. Kiefer and the guys are doing great stuff.
Yes, Kiefer Bartek.
Their production dude, Scott's a great guy. I work with him directly through iwtv, of course. And they, like, in fact, this is a little bit of a breaking news that's related to my actual job. Hopefully the IWTV boss man won't be mad at me for saying this. But even before that show comes out, that show is premiering next Thursday. Will be the premiere of that on IWTV at 9 p.m. after episode 2 of Beyond Wrestling Signature Series, the first episode of which just ended about a little bit over an hour ago, which was awesome, by the way. Check it out on demand if you haven't on IWTV. That episode was really good. But they're actually, right now, New Texas is running shows in Houston, which is where Astro World will be. But they're also running shows out on the western side of the state, out in Colorado City, which is where that crazy mayor said that crazy stuff and had to resign. But they have another show which I think is called Bedlam, which will probably be up on IWTV sometime this weekend. So that show was last weekend, and I just got the file, so that'll be up in the interim. So you'll have, if you're checking this out for the first time, you want to check out New Texas, you'll actually have a couple more New Texas shows to check out in like a week or less. So they're doing great stuff down there. Yeah. I'm always happy to plug these guys, man. There's so many good independents around the country, and it doesn't have to be a show I work for them to get credit. And the last New Texas show in Houston, they had the Bone Storm champion AJ Gray on the card. So like they're doing great stuff. Real happy with the New Texas guys. There are other ones like New South who are really trying to develop a scene in an organic way, and that's what we tried to do with Action and what we tried to do with SUP as well. So
it's so awesome to see, like it's awesome to see all of these talented wrestlers being put out there and IWTV is like the best $10 a month that you can spend, like literally. And like, we don't get any, trust me, as much as we push IWTV, we get no money from that, but all the content on there is ridiculous. It is the best $10 a wrestling fan will ever spend.
Yeah, as I shamelessly send a message to somebody on IWTV staff off camera here. No, I agree with you. Obviously, again, I'm obviously biased, but man, as somebody who came from an era where, like, literally, well, first of all, I came from an era where you gotta see the Italian Stallion and George South wrestle in a high school gym. Terry Austin's underneath, and Chris Hamrick takes a bump on his back in the second match, and you're happy with your indie show. That's the era that I come from. But the first indie I went to was in 1988, and Stan Hansen was on the show. But the progression now, and just seeing where we are now, and seeing like even just in the digital era, to come from an era where you had to hunt through YouTube, or maybe a promotion might do like a one-off pay-per-view, and and maybe it wouldn't work because the technology wasn't that great back then. It has come so far. I mean, there's still hiccups here and there. Believe me, there are as somebody heavily involved with this, there are things you're going to run into along the way. But God Almighty, there's so much stuff. I mean, look, dude, we just today, like on the back end of IWTV, we've got a bunch more shows that have come in. That new Texas Pro show I mentioned. We'll probably have a little bit more freedoms from Japan that'll go up shortly. I got there's a little bit of a scoop, but not a huge one. But we'll have some more Jersey All Pro stuff coming up soon too, which is for the archival wrestling historian folks is a big one. That's a big hit, and that's just like in the last couple days stuff that we've kind of started. I mean, and this weekend is loaded, because not only did we have Beyond today, which was like a big deal, Beyond being back, loaded show. That Chris Dickinson, Tony Deppen main event, holy crap, dude! But we've got 4 streams, all live in 2 days, Saturday and Sunday this weekend. We've got a ICW doubleheader on Saturday.
Yes.
In between that, Violence is Suffering is streaming live for the first time. We've had a couple premieres for them, but they're live with us this weekend. And then on Sunday, we got No Peace returning as well. So, it's stacked. It's
busy
stacked
weekend.
This weekend. Yep. Very, very busy weekend for me. And
violent weekend.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
Yeah.
Some of this stuff is some of these ICW matches, man, and No Peace for that matter too. You watch them and you're just like, I don't understand how this person is standing right now. I'm an old fart, man. Like I've taken like 2 or 3 bumps ever for storyline reasons in wrestling, and after all of them, I've been like, nope.
No, that was enough.
And they were all relatively simple, nothing that theatrical, So, no way. These folks are killing it every week for us, all the time, and it's great. Independent wrestling is awesome.
There's so many things so many different things you can consume of independent wrestling. We just talked about all the different promotions, and they're all a little bit different, to your point.
Yes.
And this weekend, like we're talking about, is going to get a little bit violent and hardcore. We sent Val down there. We stayed here at home.
Yeah.
We sent Val down to Florida. She'll be down there and report for us.
Shout out to Val, by the way. Let me just
we love Val.
As somebody who runs the IWTV Twitter, not exclusively, but probably 80 to 85% of the time, it's me behind that. She is always in there, always, on top of the hashtag, promoting what she supports, driving the discussion, shouting people out, giving credit where it's due. And that is really awesome to see. I mean, it seriously is really awesome to see. I've said this to her publicly from behind the IWTV handle before, but it is really cool how supportive she is, and it really is. It's awesome to see somebody like develop as an independent wrestling fan because of what we're doing on the service, and then kind of give back too. Yep. That's really neat. Mm-hmm. I I'm not gonna lie to you, like that makes me proud to be an IWTV employee. You know what I mean? So it's very cool. And there's several people like that, but Val's one of the main ones who sticks out and is always backing us up there. She's awesome. And she did good with Jaden. She did good. She was she was more polite with him than I would have been. I would have been, shut up, man. I don't want to hear any more of this shit from you.
Well, Val's doing better and better, and yeah, she's a little more polite than some of us would be to some of these guys. So that's kind of why we put her on with Jade too. That worked out really well.
Yeah, I got a low tolerance for Jaden Newman. low tolerance for obnoxious Jaden Newman.
So I'm afraid to ask this question because
oh no,
I don't know that you would have anything else besides wrestling, because we ask everybody outside of wrestling, what's your hobby? But I feel like your job and your hobby is wrestling.
So,
but is there anything else?
He's got music. He's got some music. I feel.
I do have music. I used to be much more into music than I am now, though I still listen to a lot of it. Obviously, in the COVID era, it's not like I can go to concerts, but I hadn't been to any in a long time anyway. I'm a big podcast listener, and I'll be honest with you, almost none of them are wrestling podcasts. I listen to a lot of media criticism, politics, current events, stuff like that. My politics are very weird, and nobody wants to listen to that diatribe, excuse me, right now. But like I listen to all sorts of stuff in that vein, and I walk a lot. Like I probably walk, depending on the day, no less than 8 miles a day. And
wow.
Sometimes I'll do 20. I mean, that's an excessive day, but I walk a lot, which I throw on the podcast, hoof it. I'm less of a bibliophile than I used to be, but I do read a lot. I used to read an absurd amount. I mean, I worked at Barnes & Noble for over a decade for a reason. But I do read a lot. I read, I've got my stuff that I read on the internet, news sites and, cultural criticism and stuff like that. But I also read a lot of books. There's, mostly nonfiction, mostly history. I was a history major, but not exclusively. I do like some fiction. I like speculative fiction, but not exclusively speculative fiction, historical fiction, stuff like that. So, yeah, I probably have broader hobbies than a lot of people realize, actually, because my public persona is mostly wrestling talk. I watch the TV here and there too. I'm not a huge TV guy. The pandemic, I think, has kind of turned everybody into more of a TV person than they were beforehand, though. Because when there's less stuff to do, it's like, all right, let's find a Netflix series. Let's see if it sucks or not. That kind of becomes the default. So I have done some more of that, but I would say that my hobbying is probably a little bit broader than you might assume.
I am extremely surprised. I am. That's you fit in a lot, considering how much wrestling is part of your full-time life.
Yeah, I'm probably to a fault an obsessive personality. So when I get one thing I'm very, very into, and I would be hesitant to say, I would be hesitant to say this is a hobby, but maybe it is in some ways. Is that I'm a big time geography nerd, on top of being a guy who went to school for history and whatnot. So I'll study maps for fun sometimes. I'll just wonder myself I wonder how far this place is from there, or I wonder what if there's any islands off the coast of this particular place that seems remote and in and of itself. And that kind of stuff is super fascinating to me. And actually, weirdly, or maybe not weirdly, wrestling has made me even more nerdy with stuff like that, because we'll get a promotion somewhere will send me something. I'll be like, I wonder how far it is from Fort Collins, Colorado to and I'll look it up, and then I start this is the kind of weird stuff that I'll do. So a good gift for me is a world atlas. You know what I mean? This is the kind of stuff that I read the World Almanac for fun when I was a kid too, which should not be that surprising considering my tallying of wrestling moves. But yeah, that I've got some, I've got some pretty, I've got some eclectic taste, I think, and some kind of. I don't think I have any hobbies that are especially interesting per se, but I do have a decent number of them.
I've got a pretty decent Christmas list now for you with the little notebook for your tallies and an atlas. I mean, I'm getting some ideas. This is good. Secret Santa is covered.
There we go. Get me a like an Octavia Butler biography, and we'll have the trifecta. So.
All right, Octavia Butler.
He's writing it down. He's got it.
Do you think I don't write this stuff down?
No, I'm not really sure. Like sometimes I feel like you're just like pretending to write it down, and then other times I'm like, no, he's actually writing it down.
Right, you can't see it, but there's words here.
No,
there's tallies there. There's
tallies. I've been tallying this whole time. Captain, where are we? Where are we on the list?
Freaking clue, man. I have no idea.
Do we want to get in, do we want to get into favorites? Do we want to jump into favorites?
We could jump into favorites.
And I'm gonna let the captain go first because the last few interviews I have stolen his favorites, and he gets very angry when people take away his candy. So I'm gonna allow him to go first with the favorites.
I get very angry at a lot of things.
Truth.
I mean, it's
our truth.
It's a problem. It's a problem. But I'm gonna ask, what is your favorite music to jam out to?
I'm going to say probably mid to late 90s, maybe even, and also maybe late 80s hardcore punk. So like anything from like, say, maybe Gorilla Biscuits to Kid Dynamite to even something on like the harder edge. Like if I'm really like to me, Chokehold's Content with Dying is like the best hardcore album ever. I'm sorry, it just simply is. But it sounds like it was recorded in a tin can, and that's good. That's what music from that. That's what music from that point with that sound was supposed to sound like. I don't want to hear it overproduced. It sucks then. Sorry, that's the rules of it. Even stuff like my Supreme. I'm having a bad day, and I need to like. Walk It Off music is like Path of Resistance's song Counter. If you want to get really micro analytical with this. Now my favorite band ever is actually Lucero, who is nothing like this at all stylistically. But I'm less likely to be like aggroing out, or getting the blood flowing listening to them necessarily. So
yeah. Do you have a guilty pleasure music?
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm so much of an open book in a lot of ways that I don't know that I even believe in guilty pleasures. But what I would say is I like when people, given like a lot of the stuff that I listen to, I think a lot of people are surprised by the fact that like I like a lot of what I guess people would consider trash pop that I don't think is trash pop. Like I think Kelly Clarkson's objectively good. Like I think Since You've Been Gone is like one of the best pop singles ever recorded. So stuff like that. I wouldn't necessarily call it a guilty pleasure, but I love stuff like that. A lot of I also, I listen to like a lot of 90s radio country. Growing up in South Carolina, you hear it from osmosis. Again, I don't consider it a guilty pleasure, but I love George Strait. I love Keith Whitley. I mean, that's just how it is, So, yeah, not necessarily guilty pleasures, but those are things that I think might maybe surprise some people that I kind of like.
What's your favorite match that you have called?
Oh man, that's tough.
I would have stole that.
So if am I forced to pick one? Are we going to hold me to this?
No, okay. You can pick two.
It's your podcast. More than
three.
It's your podcast. Do whatever you want.
Okay. I can pick two, but no more than three. All right. So, Alley Cat versus Brett Eisen from Sups Those Who Fear Tomorrow, which is actually the same show that has that crazy tag team match with Violence is Forever and Cabana Bandana Marco Stunt. But Ali and Brett to me is a tremendous storytelling match. And it was a match I was against us doing. I was very against it creatively. And I love when people prove me wrong. And they proved me wrong. The match was tremendous. Great match. And I really enjoyed calling it. It was just super well executed despite having a lot of things that theoretically would be working against it and make it more difficult to do. This will sound like a shill. It's really not. Royal versus Cells won from Action. $25, $100 versus Hair on IWTV. The build to that match, the enthusiasm, obviously knowing what's going to happen, sitting in the booth and just waiting for that moment, and you can't not be excited about it. I don't think that was necessarily one of my best calls. I think I personally feel like I've done better on other matches, but that feeling was super cool. Just being there, being able to call it. So I think I'll stick with those two. There's plenty of others I could name. Actually, I'll throw one other just as kind of a random one for a promotion that I have nothing to do with creatively. Kurt Stallion versus Daniel Makabe from, I forget the name of the show, but it was January of last year, New South. That one I really enjoyed, but also for selfish reasons, because those are two of my favorite people and two of my favorite wrestlers in wrestling. So that's kind of like there's a personal dynamic to that too.
Okay. Now, Chris, I know you have some questions in the chat. I got one more, and it's, what's your bucket list match of two competitors that you have not called a match before that you want to?
Wow. Okay, that's tough. So I have a
you're on the Bald Monkeys podcast. We ask the hard-hitting questions. We don't fuck around. I mean, come on.
What's weird about this is I've never really been a bucket list guy per se. It's like a lot of people have checklists, right? With like this, that, and the other. I've never necessarily been one of those guys, but I found over time that I've started to get a little bit closer to that as time has gone on. So I'll put it this way. Here's my commentary bucket list. Okay, there are people I would love to do commentary with. Among them would be Lenny Leonard and The Struggles, and probably a bunch of other people I'm forgetting, but those two immediately come to mind. I've always, even though I'm not even though I'm not like the world's biggest deathmatch fan, not that I'm not a deathmatch fan, but I'm not like I'm a deathmatch guy per se. I've always wanted to call a deathmatch, and I've never gotten to do that. Just because I think it would be interesting. It would be like a different test for me. And within that, I don't know that there's any individual person that I've never gotten to call where I thought, man, I really want to call one of their match. I mean, if I could travel in time, there would be people like any Terry Funk match, because he's the best wrestler ever lived. But I don't know that there's any individual or active person, because so much of it is story with me, or like the broader dynamic. But there are definitely there are things that could come up that I would want to call. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there are people who I would like to see in certain settings that certain people, if Kurt Stallion were to have a world title match, man, I would want to call that. That would be almost against anybody. I almost wouldn't even care who it was against. I would want to call it. I guess to force myself to answer the question as best I can, even though I've called several Daniel Makabe matches, I would love to call a Daniel Makabe and Jonathan Gresham match. Holy smokes.
Ooh.
That they've had one before at 3-2-1 battle. It's awesome. But man, I would love to call a match between those two. That would, if I was forced to pick one just off the top of my head, one match, that would probably be it. That would probably be the one I want to do.
Nice. Okay, Chris, what do you got from the chat?
All right, chat's got a few things in here. One of the chat members mistook you for Sami Zayn, but I think we've got it. We've got things cleared up now. I think.
Terrible.
So Joseph Blair, Wrestle Idiot, wants to know JT Smith or Cougar J.
Oh, that's a good question. The answer is JT Smith. It's always JT Smith. JT Smith's incredible, but man, Cougar J is great. If you like, have you guys ever seen Cougar J? Do yourself a favor. Google like just Cougar J matches, or go to YouTube and look him up. He was this enhancement guy from TV in the late '80s, primarily in '89. And a lot of people remember Lee Scott as like the crazy enhancement guy from that era, and he absolutely was, because he would take psychotic bumps. But Cougar J did this stock bump that he took that I've never seen anybody do, and it was so ridiculous that you actually sort of wondered if he was actually trained, because it was so absurd. Because so like you get thrown between the top rope and the middle rope. There's a way to sort of like slow post your way out so you can take the bump to the floor but protect yourself. Not this guy. This guy would basically get thrown between the ropes and like he was topeing air and just like fly straight to the ground. And he did this regularly. This was like not something that happened once. And JT Smith's just incredible. JT Smith's one of my all-time favorite wrestlers. One of my all-time favorite wrestlers. I know it's weird. JT Smith in ECW is literally one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. If you want to see one of my favorite segments of all time, go to, I think it's Massacre on Queens Boulevard, which I think is on the network, or whatever that's going to be called when Peacock buys it. And it is JT Smith and Little Guido in what is, I think, technically the first time the FBI was ever together as a unit, versus the Dudleys, the first time Devon was ever in. And the match is not great per se, but the segment itself is one of the funniest segments in the history of pro wrestling. It like everything about it is funny. It like I just watched it again with my brothers recently. It's still hilarious. I still laugh like the very first time I laughed when I saw it. So that's awesome. Yeah, and I mean that's like one of like JT Smith's rules. He's just great. So the answer is JT Smith.
JT Smith is the answer. Okay, got it. John Miller's killing me with questions here. There's 3 of them in there. So, John, I'm gonna do your most recent one. So, favorite Pillman match.
Oh, that's a great question. Pillman was one of my favorite wrestlers as a kid. He's still one of my 5 favorite wrestlers of all time, actually. Probably it's difficult. It actually is difficult, and a lot of people like him better as a heel. I don't. I like him better as a babyface.
Really?
Yes. Because he was a babyface that really resonated with me when I was a kid, and he was an underdog babyface. Like, you know, before there was 1, 2, 3 Kid, the high flying underdog babyface that you wanted to root for, even when he was in there with the bigger guys and the more skilled veterans, to me was Brian Pillman. To me, he was the first guy like that. Now that's not true. There's been one from every era of time immemorial. But as far as I'm concerned, that was the first one. You know, so that like he was my favorite as a kid for that reason. I'd like him as a heel. And in some ways he's better as a character as a heel, but I'm more attached to him as a babyface. I'm going to say probably the 89 match versus Luger. I don't know if it's the best match, and that was, I wish I could remember the date on that, but that might have been Halloween Havoc 89. But that match is great. Its U.S. title match is great. There was also a TV match he had with, I want to say with Rick Rude, maybe a 92 that I like a lot. But there's a lot of Pillman matches I could pick. Pillman's rules.
I love you digging into like the bank of all the matches you can remember. Like I'm amazed by how much wrestling knowledge you just hold up there, because
I'm not even close. I mean, I'm not even close. Like somebody like Chris Zellner, who's like a longtime friend of mine, is like on a level beyond even me. But you know, I have seen a lot of wrestling.
I've seen a little bit of wrestling.
Yeah,
I can't even remember the matches I watched earlier today. I mean, it's terrible.
So I like this one from Will. This is a good one. 6 months from now, who are 3 guys in the indies that we're not going to be able to book anymore?
Oh, okay. So there's 2 ways of looking at this question. All right, I'm analytical about everything. That's why I can't shut up. But there's 2 ways of looking at this question. One way is, will we not be able to book them anywhere because they're so in demand that you can't get bookings on them. The other way is they're going to be signed.
And
right?
that's how Will posed it. I kind of tweaked it a little bit.
Okay, so if we're talking about they're going to be signed, guys that I think will be signed, boy, that's hard. In 6 months, a lot of this is dependent on COVID.
Yeah.
But I think Fred Yehi may be signed in 6 months. I think he's been doing this stuff with Ring of Honor. Everybody sort of knows he's one of the best wrestlers in the world. It's like the least well-kept secret possible that Fred's incredible. I just feel like it could be time for him. And maybe he'll have a deal where he can still do some independence. That's possible, because some of those guys do. But I think Fred could be a signed guy, by the summer. I think there's a very good chance of that. This is kind of a wild one, and she just was on TV recently on Dark and just did kind of one shot. But man, Davienne is really good, and she's real good. She's one of my favorite wrestlers to watch. Like everything she does is good. She does stuff well that I don't like. Again, like this isn't even a knock on the current talent pool, but she does stuff well that like almost and I know it's through hard work and not just intuitive, because I know people that came up training with her, including Kevin Koo, by the way. They trained together. But she does stuff that seems intuitive and is really good. And once you get to that level, man, I would not be shocked. I would not be shocked to see Davienne get signed this year. I'm trying to think. There's a lot of ones that I could pick. I'm trying to think of some that might be a little bit surprising to some people. Man, there really are a lot of people that can fit in this category. Calvin Tankman, since he came up earlier, that's another dude where, and he's had a WWE tryout before. That's on public record. That's not something that we don't know about. WWE had it on their website, for God's sake. That's another guy where, man, there's not a lot of people like him, which helps. I think having there's a lot of guys on the indies and women on the indies too. I shouldn't just say guys, but there's a lot of people on the indies who are very talented in different ways. And, some of them are incredibly talented in certain ways, but having something that's a little bit unique. Like one of the things about Ben Carter, why I always say that Ben Carter got scooped up as quickly as he did, and this is coming from somebody that worked with Ben on the indies probably more than anyone, actually, because he wasn't on the indies that much, and for a while the only indies he was working was the ones I was around. But Ben, there was a way he moved around the ring that made him unique, right? So sometimes his match wasn't even that good. I'll say it flat out. It's not like I didn't say it to him. And sometimes his match was fine, maybe, but the way he moved around was so compelling that you would sometimes forgive things in the match. Maybe I didn't love that part. I didn't like that. And then once he started to put the rest of it together, well, now he's already got this hook, which is the way he moves around. Tankman just has a presence to him that I don't think a lot of guys have. And it's not just the size, and it's not just the facial expressions. It's beyond that. It's an intangible. And Tankman, I could go on. I could probably name 40 people.
I was going to say there's a lot more than 3 probably right now.
But those are 3 that jump out to me immediately. And Fred, I think kind of already has that in, so that's a little bit of a cheat, But I guess technically they all have an in. Davienne did AEW recently, and Tankman, of course, had that tryout. But if you were scratching a little bit beneath the surface, you're always going to find some people that are just below the surface as well that are going to be sort of the next guys. And I'm not saying that I think Alex Kane's going to be signed in 6 months, but you look at guys like Alex Kane or Nolan Edward, for example, it's not out of the question that they might be signed by this time next year. At the speed of how everything's working on the indies now is so accelerated that, man, there's a lot of people that are in play, and there's a lot of different places for people to go now where they can get contracts. So
Yep.
Mhm.
And a lot of
So-
opportunities for people to step up, and people then to step up and take those spots that are out there.
correct. There's so many places on the indies right now that guys can fill spots, but it's got to be earned on merit. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not like, I'm not one of these people who say, "Oh, wrestling's a meritocracy." No, it isn't. Nothing really is. But you've got to do the hard work, and you've got to have skills at a certain level, or otherwise you're going to expose yourself. It's one thing to get an opportunity, but if you get it and you shit the bed,
Mm-hmm. That might be the last one you
like,
get.
yep.
Mhm.
So like getting that opportunity and making the most of it is really, that's really the name of the game. And there are definitely some people that are going to have the chance to hit the next level on the independents in 2021. There's going to be a lot of them, actually. If they're ready, there's going to be a lot of opportunities.
So now I have to interject here, and I have a question. You talked about putting in the hard work, and doing what you need to do and all that kind of stuff. Now, one person that so many of our guests have brought up, and Alex Kane was another one, and the name is AR Fox.
Oh, he's
The
great.
the dude, just, I mean, in the ring, out of the ring, he just, it looks like he does 150% all the time, no matter what he's doing, whether it's wrestling, whether it's with the training. I would love to pick your brain on AR, and why has he not been scooped up by somebody? And that could also be because he doesn't want to get scooped up too. Maybe he likes where he
So
is.
so AR Fox, in terms of pure skill and know-how, and I actually think one area where he's actually amazing, somehow he's underrated, is building dramatic tension in a match. I think a lot of people look at AR Fox and they think, oh, he's this guy who's trained a bunch of good guys and he's like does a bunch of really cool spots. And it's like both of those things are true. But that's just like two things that are true. He's like he was in Haas last year, which I got to attend more or less as a fan. The New South Haas tournament. I didn't have anything to do. It was wonderful. I heckled people and cheered for Kurt Stallion. It was great. But I got to heckle Adam Priest. It was wonderful. Great time. But Fox was in that tournament. It's just like you watch him and you almost forget how good the dude is. And the reality is, like, I'm not like, in the case of Fox, there may be things that are in the past that are beyond his control now. And also it's a situation, I think, where in a way I don't know, in a way he has a level of value in his current role that, how do I put this?
Outweighs, maybe.
Outweighs is maybe too strong, but it because I don't want, like, if you could make $500,000 a year as like a top guy in WWE or something, I mean, of course, but like what he's doing is so significant in and of itself that some people, like, I won't name names. I'm not going to name names here because it would be completely unfair. But I know of a few people in the last few years, and they're not even people I'm close with, so don't try to speculate, because these people would surprise you, who have been offered deals or been in positions where it looked like they were about to get an offer deal a certain place, and they've decided not to do it. And in one case, it was a person who had a very good shoot job, and in order to relocate to do what he needed to do, not only would that job be gone, but he'd be taking a substantial pay cut, and be taking a substantial pay cut to perhaps sit on the bench in NXT for a year and a half. And for some guys, it's like, that's not a great fit. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that's the case with AR Fox. My point is more that the current landscape is really complicated. You know, a decade ago, if the WWE came knocking and said, "We want you," it's like, okay, where do I sign?
Yeah.
But so much has changed since then. You know, like the NXT system, like the NXT system has changed. The WWE contract structure has changed. The AEW has emerged as a player. Ring of Honor has started to give out much more significant contracts than they used to. You've still got Impact and MLW around, which have totally different types of deals. Their deals are not at all the same, but like, you know, maybe you're somebody who still feels like you need some more time on the indies, or who's doing really well in the indies, and maybe you just don't want to go to, you feel like if you go to NXT, you're going to be on a shelf for a while, and, you know, you don't feel like just doing performance center training for 2 years and barely getting on TV. And maybe you'd say, I'd rather do MLW, take my, you know, deal there and still work indies. Like I feel like the situation is so different now than it was a decade ago, that it's very, very hard to know what, even sometimes with guys where I personally have heard their version of a story. Like, I know of a dude who was offered a pretty good deal one place, but his dream was to go the other place, and that was enough for him to not go. And you know, what are you going to say to that? It's like, everybody is different in this landscape, and it's crazy to me to think about it too, because it's like, obviously, like right when I was becoming an adult, you had 3 companies in the States that were all sort of players, you know, and then for a long time there was basically 1, and now we're in a situation where there's clearly 2, and even if you feel like Ring of Honor is not at the same level, you can make a living working there. You know what I mean? Like, you factor that in, and then there's some guys that can make a living working the independents. So especially if they also have kind of maybe a deal with MLW or Impact, or, you know, maybe they go to Japan some. So it's just a totally different landscape. And I think for guys like Fox, and other people for that matter, the incentive structure is just a lot different than it was in 2011. You know.
And needless to say, the impact that Fox has on independent wrestling far outweighs, you know, what a run in a company might even be. And his legacy, I mean, is cemented with just the people that we've talked to. So, I mean, that right there is, you know,
action
the best
wrestling,
part.
Action wrestling, to take one example, I don't even know what it would look like if AR Fox was not training people. I honestly, that's not like hyperbole. I actually don't know what it would look like, but it would look a lot different. You know, and that's undeniable. And, you know, I've actually not been around him that often. He's I've been on shows with him maybe twice, but good guy, chill guy, and really good wrestler. Really good wrestler. Really good.
All right, so I got one more from the chat, and then I got one more, and I think we're gonna go to the ultimate final question.
Okay, all right.
Because
I'm ready.
we're coming up on the 2-hour mark on your podcast tonight.
Yeah,
no problem.
Just cruising along.
Guys, this is not a joke. I've done 6-hour shows before. This is nothing.
Oh my
we're this is nothing.
All right. Well, we're not doing a 6-hour show tonight.
Oh no, not tonight.
But if there is a longest show you have ever done, I want to challenge that, and I think we should beat it, Chuck. I think we should.
Yes.
Good luck. Chris Zellner and I did a greatest wrestler ever episode that might have been it. I think the two shows we did combined were like 11 or 12 hours. So
oh my Lord.
We're gonna get Big Baby Jimmy on the podcast, and we'll take care of that.
Break that.
Yeah, he could do it by himself, probably just talking to himself.
True.
All right. So one more question from the chat. you have one indie wrestler that you could tell us about that we are going to know about soon that we don't know about right now, who is that one wrestler?
Oh man, one.
Just one.
One and only one.
Okay. Let me ask this: Does it that am I speaking? Is the we I'm speaking to the bald monkeys, or is the we I'm speaking to the collective zeitgeist of the independent wrestling landscape?
That second one.
Damian Tangra. Damian Tangra's the answer. Okay, because there are people that could fit in this, like like an Adam Priest, for example, or somebody like that. But Tangra, I feel like, he's still in that phase where he's almost totally under the radar. It, like, unless you're watching action, you probably haven't even heard his name. But he's been in action 3 times now. Every single match was different. Every single match was good. Every single match he was in there was like it's one thing for him to have a good sprint with Kane, who he trains with, and it was real good. Don't get me wrong, I loved it. But to go in there with 2 veterans, and like Cabana Van Dam and Dominic Guarini, and to get where both guys are trying to test him a little bit, like let's see what he's got, and to hit 2 home runs like that. If Damian Tangra wants it, 2021 is going to be a year for him. That's the answer. There are plenty of other people I could pick. Bunch of guys out of basically any H2O student, almost any Matt Tremont student could qualify here. They're also damn good. Marcus Mathers, Dylan McKay, Christian Raw. I mean, like everybody up there. But Damian Tangra is going to be my answer, because I think he is just like the guy, like underneath a sheet of ice, banging violently with a pickaxe, and when he breaks through, it's going to be like an emerging monster, Tanger's the answer.
And yeah, that is definitely somebody that we are definitely aware of, but the rest of the world is about to be.
And he has an open invitation. He already said he would do the podcast at some point. I mean, we love Damian.
Chuck's got a little bit of a crush.
I mean, I can't blame him. Tanger's a handsome and a kind fellow, so.
All right, so a lot of fun. We've had a blast, but we started at the beginning. We got through all the craziness, and we're gonna go back. We're gonna go back one more time to the young years, and you have an opportunity to talk to your 10-year-old self. What are you gonna go back and tell 10-year-old Dylan?
Don't get arrested for stealing a soda while your ex-wife is pregnant with your child. That would be one thing I would say. That was a critical mistake. So that would absolutely be one thing I would say. I would say, I think I would try to convince myself that the whole dreams can be reality thing is real. There I am. I'm back. But I would try to convince myself that the whole dreams could be reality thing is real, because for a long time in my life, cynicism was a major part of my everyday existence, and everybody's got a little cynic in them. And man, there's a lot of days where being involved in independent wrestling is not a dream, let me tell you. But the fact that it's a lot of work. I work constantly on iwtv stuff. I've been doing stuff halfway at times on this call with you guys. Seriously, it's crazy. But to be able to do it and to be able to make some money in wrestling, and to be able to do commentary and have fun and tell stories, 10-year-old me would have been amazed by that. And if I could have eliminated the years of cynicism I had between, say, the ages of 12, 13 and the ages of 27, 28, my life probably would have been a lot better during that period. Not that it was all bad, it certainly wasn't, but I guarding against the creeping incursion of cynicism in my teen years, I think, would be the number one thing I would stress to a 10-year-old me. And don't get arrested for stealing a Coke. Don't do that. Actually, it was a Barks root beer.
Okay, I was gonna ask because someone did mention Barks root beer in the chat earlier, and I was like, was it a Barks?
I was a little concerned.
Someone likes his root beer.
There you go.
The best, man. The best beverage in the world. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, it's good. Now everybody saw Dylan left for a second. He actually did go back in time in that brief moment and did tell his 10-year-old self those things.
I confer. Now I conferred with my child self.
He did. Now when you did leave for that brief moment in time, were you in the DeLorean from Back to the Future, or were you in the phone booth from Bill and Ted?
Oh man, I would have been in the DeLorean. I'm a Back to the Future guy, 100%.
It's okay.
100%. I don't even dislike Bill and Ted. I like Bill and Ted, but
I like Bill and Ted too. But it's a DeLorean. Come on.
So
also the Back to the Future ride at Universal Studios is the best ride ever.
The best.
I'm still mad that they took it out.
The best. Back to the Future, the King Kong, and the Jaws ride. The three best rides.
The best era of any true theme park ever. But that's a totally different podcast.
Totally different podcast. That's the 6-hour podcast. That is not the 2-hour podcast. On
that or Gore Vidal next, but we'll stick with this.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had the 10A question. Now we have the 10B question, and out of everything that we've talked about today, I mean, I'm sure you've heard the rumblings. There's always rumblings.
I've got anxiety
when it comes to this question, and it has to do with a certain cookie.
I wish my feed would die now. So I don't have to answer.
It has to do with Oreos. Are you on team double stuff or team single stuff?
I know that the right answer to this is not going to be what I'm going to say. I got to tell you, man, I'm single stuff. I got to tell you, I'm not a huge. I like mint Oreos and I like them thin. That's just how it goes. I'm sorry to disappoint. I'm not a double stuff guy. I'm a less is more guy when it comes to Oreos.
So disappointed. He even went thin mint.
It's the best one. Listen, guys, I don't know what to tell you.
If I could throw my headphones in the air, I would, but they're attached to the computer.
Listen,
I'll crumple my paper again.
There you go.
At the end it circles back, and I guess I'm going heel again. But this is, I don't make the laws of science. I just abide by them. And there's an objective truth standard we've got to deal with here. Now, if you're a fan of Thomas Kuhn and the structure of scientific revolutions, or if you're a deep postmodernist, you might be of the opinion that there might be some room for nuance or other opinion on this particular topic. I'm here to tell you you're wrong objectively. Mint Oreos thin are the best. Those are facts, and you can argue with facts if you want, but it doesn't change them. It doesn't change the nature of reality. This is a concrete thing that we're engaging in at this moment. And if you want to take the Foucaultian position that there's some room for an alternative hypothesis or thesis on this, you're welcome to do so, but I reject on principle.
Someone needs to clip that entire whatever that was. Yeah. And just go ahead and post that, because one, there was words in there that I have no idea what he was saying, and two, it was all wrong because it's double stuff, and that's the end of the story. I'm not as eloquent as you. I just like double stuffed Oreos. I'm sorry.
I'll allow your deviation because you guys are such great supporters of independent wrestling.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that.
I will allow that, and I want to thank you guys again for having me on, and I also want to thank you guys for sponsoring Southern Underground Pros. Are these our lives? March 14th. Violence is Forever versus the Bitcoin Boys announced. Alex Kane versus Cole Radrick announced as of tonight. Thanks again to IWTV Guide for that, and also thank you guys for all the IWTV plugs and support. That's huge for me, both personally and professionally. So thank you guys for that.
No problem. It's independent wrestling has brought us a lot in 2020. It was a weird year, but the good that came out of it, I feel, is that independent wrestling has gotten this second life or boost or third life. I don't know what you would call it in independent wrestling. It might be like 12th or 13th life, but independent wrestling is bigger and better than ever. And I think it's because of all the crap we went through in 2020. And we took a really bad thing and got something great out of it, which is independent wrestling, IWTV, tons of wrestling in the South, tons of wrestling in the North, wrestling in places that I didn't even know there was wrestling. And just the ability to, meet people that I would have never met before. So thank you for being so open and allowing us into your world.
Oh man, I had a blast. This was fun. I talk a lot, as we now have proof. If there's any questions, any doubts about it,
it's your job.
It's true.
I talk a lot, but seriously, I had a great time. And being able to tell my child I was on Twitch, man, she's gonna be that's gonna be a thing. This is good. She's like, as far as she's concerned, I'm peak boomer tech, so this is a huge event of world significance. So thank you guys for having me.
No problem.
Well, you guys know where to go follow. You know where to go check out Sup, and you know where to go check out Action. Go find Dylan on Twitter. Go find us on Twitter. Go find, man, we talked about so many wrestlers tonight. Everybody we talked about, go follow them. I saw somebody already followed Damian Tonga. There's more people to follow out there. Support independent wrestling. Don't worry about the questions. John's apologizing for all the questions he asked. It's okay. It's all right. We're here for.
I love John. Despite John, I love him.
Despite John, we love him. There you go. Perfect.
There you go.
But Dylan, thank you. We definitely would love to have you back on again at some time in the future. But that being said, we look forward to the closed set shows and possibly what that might be and what could come of the future. So we're looking forward to it. And you got a sponsor for a while now, as long as Matt lets us.
Thank you, guys. Thanks again. And also, even though she's not here, thank you, Val, as well. You guys have a good night.
Everybody say hi to Val. And yes, y'all have a good night. Go follow us on all those social medias. I'm done plugging stuff. Let's get out of here.
Yeah. Visit iwtv.live today to watch these great Action wrestling events, plus numerous other archive shows from Action and other great independent promotions. Use code ACTION for a free 5-day trial. Don't miss out. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Bald Monkeys. Watch us live on our new Twitch channel, twitch.tv/TheBaldMonkeys.